The mimosas at Maxwell's were always too sweet, but my mother insisted we meet here every Sunday. Something about keeping up appearances, about being seen at the right places by the right people. I watched her add a third sugar packet to her coffee, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the morning light. Honestly, Olivia, she sighed, stirring with practiced disappointment, I don't understand why you insist on embarrassing us like this. That little antique shop of yours, it's beneath you, beneath this family. My father didn't look up from his phone, probably checking the stock prices for Barrett Financial, the investment firm he'd built from the ground up. Your mother's right. You're wasting your potential sorting through other people's junk. I took a small sip of water, letting their words wash over me like they always did. They'd never visited my shop, never seen what I'd built. To them, Morgan and Vale Antiquities was just another failure in their daughter's long list of disappointments. Business school applications are still open for spring semester, my mother continued, her voice sharp with false concern. Though after your last attempt. That's enough, Margaret, my father interrupted, finally looking up. She's too dumb for business school. We all know that. Scored in the bottom percentile on her entrance exams, couldn't even make it through the first interview. Best to let her play with her little shop until she comes to her senses. I carefully spread clotted cream on my scone, making sure to keep my movements precise, controlled. They had no idea that I'd deliberately tanked those entrance exams, that I'd walked out of that interview on purpose, just like they had no idea that Morgan and Vale wasn't just an antique shop. It was a front for one of the most successful private investment firms in the city. At least tell me you're making rent, my mother pressed. We can't keep covering for you forever. I thought about the building I owned, not just my shop, but the entire historic block in downtown's arts district. Thought about the portfolio I managed, the silent investments I'd made in dozens of emerging companies. Thought about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow with Barrett Financial's biggest potential client, a meeting my parents had been trying to arrange for months. I manage, I said quietly, letting them see what they wanted to see. Their soft, simple daughter in her simple dress with her simple dreams. My father shook his head, silver hair perfectly styled despite the humid morning. Management requires intelligence, strategic thinking. You've never shown aptitude for either. Just look at how you decorated that shop. Mixing periods, styles. No sense of value or order. The mixing of periods, he criticized, was actually a carefully curated collection that had caught the eye of Marcus Anderson, CEO of Anderson Global Ventures. He'd walked into my shop 3 months ago, looking for period-specific pieces for his new offices. He'd left with a signed investment deal that would make headlines once announced. And that name, my mother added with a delicate shudder, Morgan and Vale, sounds like a funeral home. Why not use Barrett? At least then you'd have some credibility. Because Morgan was my grandmother's maiden name, the grandmother who taught me about true value, about seeing beyond surface appearances. And Vale? That was for the valley where I'd made my first investment, turning a small inheritance into the seed of what would become a quiet empire. Speaking of credibility, my father said, his tone shifting to something sharper, I heard you were asking questions about Barrett Financial's new tech division, trying to understand what your betters are doing. I had more than asked questions. I'd been systematically acquiring shares through various shell companies, positioning myself for a move they'd never see coming. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. Just curious, I murmured, dabbing my lips with a napkin. Family interest. He laughed, the sound cold and dismissive. Family interest? You can barely balance your shop's books. Leave the real business to those who understand it. I checked my watch. A simple Timex that hid the Patek Philippe I wore to board meetings. Speaking of the shop, I should get going. Sunday inventory. Of course, my mother sighed. Run along to your little toys. Just remember, when you finally admit defeat, your father might have an entry-level position available. Filing, perhaps. I stood, smoothing my plain dress. The one I wore just for these brunches. So different from the designer pieces that filled my real closet. Thank you for brunch. See you next Sunday. As I walked away, I heard my father's voice. Bottom percentile. Can you believe we raised someone that dumb? I smiled slightly, thinking about tomorrow's meeting. About how Anderson Global Ventures was about to become Barrett Financial's biggest client. Through me. Their silent investor. About how my father's tech division was about to discover its majority shareholder was his dumb daughter. The drive to my shop was quiet. Sunday morning traffic light. I parked my modest Honda, another prop in my carefully constructed image, behind the Victorian building that housed Morgan and Vail. The real car, a Bentley Continental, waited in a private garage across town. Inside, the shop was exactly as my father had criticized, a masterful blend of periods and styles, each piece carefully chosen not just for its aesthetic value, but for the stories it could tell. Stories about patience, about waiting for the right moment, about value hidden in plain sight. My assistant, Sarah, looked up from the antique desk where she managed not shop inventory but investment portfolios worth millions. How was brunch? Predictable, I replied, slipping off my flat shoes and replacing them with Louboutins. Are we ready for tomorrow? She nodded, pulling up detailed financial reports on her laptop. Anderson's team has finished their due diligence. They're prepared to sign with Barrett Financial. Through us, of course. Your father won't know you're involved until you want him to. I'd moved through the shop, running my fingers along a Georgian sideboard that had once graced a duke's dining room. Like me, it had secrets. A hidden compartment that once held royal letters now contained documents detailing my ownership of key Barrett Financial assets. Final projections? I asked, settling behind my own desk, a Queen Anne piece that had witnessed countless business deals over its 3 centuries. Conservative estimate puts the deal at $50 million initial investment, with potential for up to $200 million over 5 years. Sarah paused, a small smile playing at her lips. Your father's been trying to land Anderson for months. Never realized his own daughter had already sealed the deal. I opened my laptop, checking the latest market updates. Barrett Financial's stock was up, riding high on rumors about tomorrow's meeting. My father had probably spent his entire brunch checking those same numbers, never knowing who really controlled them. Did you see the latest board memo? Sarah asked, forwarding me an email. They're planning to announce your father as CEO Emeritus next quarter, transition to new leadership. They're considering external candidates since, apparently, there's no one suitable in the family. I smiled, thinking about the shares I'd accumulated, the voting power I'd quietly amassed. Interesting timing. A text lit up my phone. My mother? Darling, do reconsider business school. Your father and I hate seeing you waste your life like this. I set the phone aside without responding. Let them think what they wanted. Tomorrow would change everything. Sarah cleared her throat. Your suit for tomorrow's meeting arrived. Alexander McQueen. The tailor made the adjustments you requested. Perfect. I stood, moving to adjust a delicate Venetian mirror that had once hung in a doge's palace. In its reflection, I saw not the simple shopkeeper my parents mocked, but the businesswoman I truly was, sharp, focused, unstoppable. "Shall I confirm the meeting time?" Sarah asked. "Your father's office has been calling all morning, trying to reschedule around Anderson's demands." "No need," I replied. "Everything stays exactly as planned. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Barrett Financial's main conference room. Time for the family business to meet the family disappointment." The rest of Sunday passed in careful preparation. While my parents probably sat in their country club, lamenting their daughter's failures, I reviewed contracts, confirmed positions, and finalized the details that would make tomorrow more than just a meeting. It would be a revelation. As evening fell, I locked up the shop's front door, the antique key heavy in my hand. Through the Victorian windows, I could see the streetlights coming on, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors and priceless artifacts within. My phone buzzed again, a message from Marcus Anderson himself. "Ready for tomorrow? Your parents won't know what hit them." I typed back a simple response. They never do. Tomorrow, while they were expecting Marcus Anderson to arrive as a potential client, they discover he was already an investor, my investor. Tomorrow, while they were preparing to pitch their services, they'd learn that their biggest deal was already done, signed in their daughter's little shop between a Louis XV commode and a Chippendale chair. Tomorrow, everything would change. I drove home to my real apartment, a penthouse with views of the city they thought I couldn't afford. Replacing my simple dress with silk loungewear, I poured a glass of wine and reviewed tomorrow's schedule one final time. 8:30 a.m. Arrive at Barrett Financial, not as the failed daughter but as Morgan Vale, the investment broker they'd been trying to track down for months. 8:45 a.m. Meet Marcus in the lobby, right under my father's nose. 9:00 a.m. Walk into the conference room and watch their faces as they realized who really controlled their future. My phone lit up one last time. "My father, if you're free tomorrow, the mailroom could use some help. Might be good experience for you. Better than playing shop." I didn't respond. Tomorrow would be response enough. Monday morning dawned clear and sharp, the kind of autumn day that makes everything feel possible. I dressed with careful precision. A black Alexander McQueen suit that cost more than my parents thought I made in a year. Louboutin heels that had never seen the inside of my antique shop. And my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch, the only piece of my real life I'd never hidden. Sarah met me at my penthouse, carrying 2 leather portfolios. "Your father's already at the office," she reported, handing me one of the folders. "Called an early meeting to prep the team for Anderson's arrival. Your mother's there too." Apparently, she couldn't miss this historic moment for Barrett Financial. I smiled, checking my reflection one last time. Gone was any trace of the simple shopkeeper they knew. In her place stood Morgan Vale, the investment broker who'd been making waves in private equity circles for the past 5 years. "How long do you think it'll take them to realize?" Sarah asked as we rode the elevator down to the private garage. "That depends," I replied, sliding into the Bentley's leather interior, "on whether they see what they expect to see, or what's actually in front of them." The drive to Barrett Financial's headquarters was smooth, traffic parting for the luxury car they didn't know I owned. As we pulled into the executive parking area, I spotted my father's Mercedes in his reserved space, the vanity plate reading BARRETT1, subtle as ever. Marcus Anderson was waiting in the lobby, his tall frame casual against the marble pillar. He straightened when he saw me, a grin playing at his lips. "Ready for the show?" he asked quietly as I approached. Born ready, I replied, just as my father's voice boomed across the lobby. Marcus, welcome to Barrett Financial. He strode forward, hand extended, my mother 2 steps behind him in her perfectly coordinated designer suit. Neither of them glanced at me. After all, why would they look twice at a stranger in expensive clothes? Marcus shook my father's hand but kept his eyes on me. Robert, Margaret, always a pleasure. But I believe you know my investment broker. Morgan Vale. The moment stretched like pulled glass, fragile and sharp. I watched as confusion flickered across my father's face, followed by dismissal. After all, his daughter couldn't possibly be the mysterious Morgan Vale they'd been pursuing for months. Morgan Vale, he repeated, finally turning to look at me properly. I wasn't aware we'd be joined by. His voice trailed off. I saw the exact moment recognition hit, saw his eyes widen as he took in my appearance, my presence, my complete transformation from the daughter he thought he knew. Hello, Dad, I said softly. Surprise. My mother's hand flew to her throat, her perfectly manicured nails clutching her pearl necklace. Olivia? What is this? What are you doing here? Perhaps, I suggested, my voice carrying the authority of someone who controlled billions. We should take this to the conference room. We wouldn't want to cause a scene in the lobby. Marcus nodded approvingly. Excellent idea. After you, Ms. Vale. I led the way to the elevators, feeling my parents' shocked stares boring into my back. The ride up was silent, thick with unasked questions and unwelcome realizations. The conference room was already full, board members, department heads, even my father's executive team, all waiting for the meeting that would change everything. They rose as we entered, their eyes moving curiously between Marcus Anderson, my shell-shocked parents, and me. Good morning, I said, taking my place at the head of the table, my father's usual seat. For those who don't know me, I'm Morgan Vale of Morgan and Vale Investments. Though some of you, I glanced at my parents, who had yet to sit down, might know me better as Olivia Barrett. The room erupted in whispers. I saw recognition dawn on face after face as they connected the dots between the simple Barrett daughter and the investment broker who'd been making headlines. This is absurd, my father finally managed, his face flushing. Olivia, what kind of game are you playing? No game, Dad, I replied, opening my portfolio. Just business. Marcus, shall we begin? Marcus took his seat, clearly enjoying the drama. Of course. As you all know, Anderson Global Ventures has been considering a significant investment in Barrett Financial. What you don't know is that we've already made our decision through Morgan and Vale Investments. I slid documents across the table. 3 months ago, Anderson Global Ventures committed to a $50 million initial investment, with provisions for up to $200 million over 5 years. The paperwork has already been signed and executed. Impossible, my father breathed, staring at the contracts. These would have needed board approval, which they received. I cut in smoothly. Through the voting shares I've been acquiring over the past 5 years. As of last quarter, I control 32% of Barrett Financial's voting stock. My mother sank into a chair, her perfect posture crumbling. But your shop, your failed business school attempts. The shop is real, I confirmed. It's also incredibly profitable, though not just from antiques. It's the front for one of the most successful private investment firms in the city. As for business school, I smiled. I already had my MBA from London Business School when you were pushing me to apply. I walked out of that interview because I was in the middle of closing a major deal. The board members were leafing through the documents I'd distributed, their expressions moving from shock to something like respect. They understood what this meant, not just the Anderson investment, but the revelation that the failed Barrett daughter was actually a financial powerhouse. "Why?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "Why the deception? Why let us think?" "Because you never asked," I replied simply. "You were so convinced of my failures, so certain of my limitations, that you never bothered to look deeper. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe." Marcus cleared his throat. If I might add, Olivia, or Morgan as I first knew her, has been instrumental in reshaping the private equity landscape over the past 5 years. The little shop you mock, it's facilitated over $1 billion in private investments. My father collapsed into his chair, the weight of his misjudgment finally hitting him. All this time, every Sunday brunch, every time you called me dumb, I finished for him. Every time you dismissed my potential, every time you offered me a filing job, I was closing deals bigger than Barrett Financial's annual revenue. The room had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on the family drama unfolding before them. I stood, smoothing my designer suit. "Now, shall we discuss the future of Barrett Financial? Because I have some ideas about the tech division you've been struggling with." The next 2 hours were a blur of presentations, questions, and strategic planning. I laid out my vision for Barrett Financial's future, a vision that had been forming since I first started buying shares. My father remained unusually quiet, watching me command the room he'd always dominated. By noon, the board had unanimously approved my proposal for restructuring the company. My father's transition to emeritus status was accelerated, and I was appointed as strategic director, though I insisted on maintaining my separate identity as Morgan Vale for my other business ventures. As the room cleared out, my mother finally found her voice again. "Those brunches," she said quietly. "All those times we criticized you, looked down on you, were necessary," I finished. "They kept you from looking too closely, from asking too many questions." Though I admit, the bottom percentile comment last Sunday was a bit harsh. My father hadn't moved from his chair, staring at the contracts spread across the table. "I don't understand," he said finally. "How did we not see it?" I perched on the edge of the conference table, looking down at the man who'd spent years looking down at me. "Because you saw what you expected to see. A simple girl with simple dreams, playing shop while the real business happened elsewhere. You never wondered why Anderson Global Ventures suddenly became interested in Barrett Financial. Never questioned why your stock kept rising despite market downturns. Never thought to look closely at Morgan Vale's track record. And the shop?" my mother asked. "All those mixed periods you keep there are carefully curated to attract exactly the right kind of clients," I explained. "CEOs, investment bankers, private equity partners. They all come looking for unique pieces and end up discussing business opportunities. That Georgian sideboard Dad hates? I closed a $100 million deal while showing it to a tech entrepreneur last month." Marcus, who had lingered by the door, chuckled. "That's how she got me. Came in looking for antiques, left with a whole new investment strategy." A knock at the door interrupted us. Sarah, carrying fresh contracts. "Sorry to interrupt, but the Hong Kong office is calling about the merger." "Hong Kong office," my father repeated weakly. "Morgan and Vale has offices in 6 countries," I confirmed, standing to take the documents from Sarah. "That little shop is just the tip of a very large iceberg." As I moved to leave, My mother called out. Sunday brunch? Will you? Will you still come? I turned back, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear that her simple daughter had become someone she didn't know, someone who didn't need their approval anymore. Of course, I said softly, but maybe we can skip the career advice. 3 months later, Barrett Financial had been transformed. The tech division was thriving under new leadership. The Anderson investment had exceeded all projections, and my father was adjusting to his emeritus role, though he still occasionally left suggestions on my desk. Sunday brunches continued at Maxwell's, but they were different now. My mother no longer added sugar to her coffee with disappointment, and my father's phone stayed in his pocket. Instead, they asked questions, real ones, about my business, my vision, my life. I still kept the shop, still spent time among the antiques that had helped build my empire. But now, when my parents visited, they saw it for what it was. Not a failure, but a masterpiece of subtle success. And if sometimes, during board meetings or investment discussions, I caught my father watching me with a mixture of pride and regret, well, that was just part of the new normal. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right, quietly and completely, until they have no choice but to see you for who you really are. Even if who you really are is the dumb daughter who built an empire while they weren't looking.